Welcome back. I'm Barry Craig. The General Assembly has been gavelled to a close. And with me to talk about what the legislature did and maybe didn't do are two of our campus political gurus. They are Professor Gerald Watkins, political science professor, and Cale Sullivan, who loves politics passionately. Well, welcome back to the program. And let's begin. Governor Beshear picked up the dice and he rolled the dice on casino gambling. And when the cubes bounced around, they came up snake eyes. What happened to the governor's casino gambling initiative?
Well, Snake Eyes pays 30 to 1, and Beshear didn't quite get a 30 to 1 return on that. Beshear, as we all know, based his 2007 election campaign on, for one thing, the Follies, Fletcher's Follies, and also on expanding gaming in Kentucky. Kentucky expanded gaming in 1987 with the lottery, and he wanted to take it up to full-fledged casinos.
Perhaps a logical step.
Mm-hmm. But and the governor waited till February 14th, Valentine's Day, I believe, to finally announce his version of the gaming bill, which would require 60 votes to pass in the House and 23 votes in the Senate, and then be submitted to the voters for an up or down vote in a constitutional amendment in November 2008. The support in the House never quite got there. They came very close to getting the 60 votes, but never got there, and the support in the Senate really never was there. I saw whip counts that showed about 14 in favor, 10 on the fence, and 14 against. And he would have had to have gotten 9 of those 10 to go along with him, and the votes just weren't there.
It's impossible.
Yeah, Cal's exactly right, and they've never been there. Casino gambling has been an issue in Kentucky on the forefront since, I guess you could say, the 2000 session, when the gambling interests began to start searching for sponsors to try to get it through the House and Senate and on the ballot, as Cal said, in the form of a referendum to amend the Constitution. And I remember the first couple of sessions, they couldn't even find one sponsor in the House nor one in the Senate to even get it introduced into committee. So and now it has some more support, and I think you can probably hand that to Governor Steve Beshear. He ran on it as part of his platform, and he won by 17–18% of the vote. But quite frankly, I don't think that any of that victory margin you could attribute to his support for casino gambling. That was just another issue he had, but he won because of the failure and the problems and the flaws and the bad publicity and the legal problems of the previous administration. And so I don't think he could ever claim, he may have thought that he had a mandate, but he never had a mandate from the voters. And so I didn't think that it would ever pass to start with, but through some serious arm twisting and some maneuvering in the House, I think at most they got, 55 votes. I think that one time the Speaker said he had about 55 votes in the House, and he needed 60. So he couldn't even get it through the Democratic-controlled House, and as Cal said, in the Senate there never was a serious the margin would have never even come close to what the votes that they needed. So, and if you look at the polls, I was even surprised at this much that 42% of the public in Kentucky said they would vote for it, 48% opposed it, but 82% said, well, I'd really like to just vote for it myself. But even at that, the lawmakers have to run for re-election, and all the House this year and a half of the Senate, and they know the sentiment in their own districts, and the sentiment across Kentucky overall is Kentucky's a conservative state. It's a church-going state. It's traditional, moderate, and the casino gambling is not something, for a lot of different reasons, that the people support. So I never believed that it would come out of the House and the Senate, and it didn't, and I suppose that it's dead for now, or maybe it didn't. I don't know. I guess until people get to vote on it, it may continue to keep coming up. But if you can't, when you first get elected, you're popular, you're on your honeymoon with the General Assembly, with the voters, and it's your first highest priority in the first budget of your session, when you start your administration and you can't get it passed, then it's not going to pass. So I think we can just bury it and say, Why bring it up anymore? Why waste energy and time on it? It's a dead issue in Kentucky. It's not going to pass. So let's move forward.
The next question then is, and I agree with you that he certainly expended precious political capital on this and lost, even with the Democratic House. How badly damaged will Beshear be for the rest of his term?
It depends. Right now, the Survey USA polling done last week showed Governor Beshear with a 46% approval rating and 48% disapproval rating. That's pretty dangerous territory for a governor who hasn't even been in office 6 months. However,
That's almost Fletcher-like, isn't it? Because you think of Fletcher, he starts off and it just dwindles down.
could be, and many many internet columnists and that sort of thing, bloggers have compared Beshear's first few months to Fletcher's first 2 years. But he's going to have 9 months, or roughly about 8 months between now and he's going to have a substantial period of time between now and the start of the 2009 session, which will be a 30-day session. And he can, if he's smart, if he goes about in a smart way, he can go and rebuild some goodwill among the voters through a 2008 elections. He can go out and try to campaign in some of the state legislative races. Mike Lawrence is going to be campaigning against Stephen Rudy, and I've heard the governor's people say that that seat is going to be one of the top targets of House Democrats for a take back. But if the governor goes and uses the capital he has remaining wisely, he can go into the 2009 session with quite a bit of influence. Also, he's still the governor. Governor still holds some power. He can veto bills. And, you know, I'm trying to think of a saying here, but it's like, pretty much somebody who, a person, if you go and try to back a person to a corner, a lot of times that's just all the more dangerous it can make them. And Beshear's going to try to use a lot of his authority.
And I think, too, you think of Fletcher, it was a scandal. It was drip, drip, drip of this scandal, whereas Beshear made a pitch for something fair and square. He lost fair and square. So it's not quite the same thing. He has plenty of time to recover himself. But you're right, I have seen these internet bloggers and the political columnists say that, man, this guy, he hasn't done well so far.
Yeah, and you're right, and Cal's right. I think Governor Beshear can recover. He's got plenty of time, the power of the governor, and he, he's has the media at his beck and call, and there's a lot of things he can do. I think he's learned some lessons. He's been out of office for 20 years, and the governor's relationship with the General Assembly has changed in that time frame. The General Assembly today is much more independent than it was back when he was in office, and I don't think he probably realized that. So I think he's probably learned a lesson that he's going to have, if he wants to get his agenda passed, he's going to have to sit down and talk with the leadership in the House and the Senate and try to hammer out a compromise that they can accept before he tries to start pushing his legislative agenda. I think that's one lesson he's probably learned. And the other is, like you said, this was an issue. So he lost on it. Okay, well, you're a governor is not going to win all their fights. So he learns a lesson and he moves forward. I think the biggest thing that would help his administration is the economy. If the economy rebounds, and surely it will by the end of his first term, he'll have more money and be able to do more things for more people and for the state, and that'll improve his public standing. But we're in a downturn. Revenue's down. He this morning said it looks like it's down 6% right now. So when revenue's down, you either raise taxes or you cut programs, you cut spending, and neither one of them's popular. So, and that was part of the reason for the proposal of the casino bill anyway, was to bring in revenue.
Let me ask you this. If the economy continues to turn down and goes down, 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 could he then reintroduce casino gambling and say, well, I told you before to go ahead and raise money?
He could, but I think he needs to get David Williams on his side, and that's going to be difficult to do. Constitutionally, Kentucky has to balance its budget, unlike the federal government. So we've got to equate revenue with spending. And if revenue is down, you've either got to cut spending or you got to raise some taxes. And for the life of me, I don't understand the Senate Republicans being opposed for instance, the cigarette tax. I mean, if you look at polls, 80% of Kentuckians favor an increase in the cigarette tax. The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, that is big business, they endorse Republicans usually, and they have endorsed an increase in the cigarette tax. But the Republicans, I suppose they want to use it as an issue in the campaign that we're opposed to all tax increases, and see, we voted that way, we can blame these Democrats for trying to raise your taxes. Well, I mean, that's a no-win issue when it comes to the cigarette tax. So if you've got to have some revenue from somewhere, and they're not willing to do that, and they're not willing to look at other areas to increase, and you can't cut spending the way the original proposal was, especially not for higher education. I mean, that's just not doable. And so you've got to do something. So if the General Assembly feels like they're in a situation where, okay, we don't have any choice, then it could be revisited.
Mm-hmm. Where do we stand on the cigarette tax right now?
Well, right now, this is the way it looks from a fiscal standpoint. A 1 cent hike in the cigarette tax would bring in roughly about $4 million in extra revenue. However, one of the problems one of the political problems is that 70% of Kentucky's population is amassed along its borders. And state representatives, state senators from the borders, where they get people coming in from places like Illinois, which has this ungodly tax on cigarettes. People will come in from Illinois to Kentucky to go and buy cigarettes. And business owners, people who own gas stations or tobacco shops, that if a cigarette tax is raised, it hurts their businesses. Mm-hmm. And going back to what he was saying, really Beshear has placed an emphasis on the power of one, the constituency of one, his power as governor. And I think if he wants to be an effective governor, if he wants to get reelected, he's going to have to put emphasis on the power of three. He's going to bring in the House Speaker. He's going to bring in the Senate President. And then together they can work out a compromise that can get through the legislature. That's the way it's been done in other states, such as New York, for example. Usually in New York, and this is the way it was when George Paducah was governor of New York, they'd bring in the Democratic House Speaker and the Republican Senate Majority Leader, and along with the Republican governor, they go and work stuff out. And also, going to the Senate Republicans voting down cigarette tax, the way the Republican Senate has been trying to balance its budget, I don't think that is going to appeal to a large majority of Kentuckians either. Kentucky's had a 12% hike in its prison population last year. That was the largest in the nation. And one of the ways that the Republican Senate is wanting to be able to balance the budget is by releasing a lot of felony offenders into the population. Just go ahead and release them from the obligations of their sentence. And I don't think that's going to play well with a vast majority of Kentucky voters.
It'll be a big issue for the Democrats for sure.
It sure will be. And what is the cigarette tax in Kentucky? What is it, 20 cents or something like that? 30 cents, which it's still the third, I think, the third lowest in out of the 50
it's
states.
Still absolutely
30 cents a pack. There was a representative from Henderson who introduced a bill to raise it 70 cents to $1. Yeah, so it's 30 cents. But there's room, I mean, that's third lowest in the nation.
Well, do you think maybe the legislature would go back and revisit that issue, that it would at least, okay, we propose 70% increase, they might come back and do 35 cents?
It could, but, a 70-cent increase, that's going to, because taxation income, the higher you raise taxes, the lower the income is going to be. I wouldn't say a 1 cent increase is going to be $4 million once you're talking about 80 or 90 cents. But I think still you could be talking about $150 to $200 million even with a 70-cent increase, and that is a fair chunk of money. Not to mention the budget deficit.
Oh heavens, yes.
Yeah, that would correct a large portion of the budget deficit and bring Kentucky back to living within its means.
So what will happen now? There is talk about a special session, is there not, out there?
Yeah, I think they're going to have to. One issue that's going to have to be resolved soon, and I think a special session will be called for that, if for nothing else, and that's pension reform, because it's going to bankrupt cities in Paducah in the years to come if it doesn't happen. So, and I thought there was a good bill that had been passed. I think it was Mike Cherry was a sponsor, that I thought would pass, but something held it up, and so I don't believe it was signed into law or is in a position to be signed into law. So I think you'll have a special session for that, and we may have to have one for the budget. I mean, there's got to, if revenue continues to fall because of the economic downturn, then the General Assembly is going to have to go back and do something.
So if we go back in the special session, again, the two ways to raise the money is, again, this gambling bill or cigarette tax. You think the gambling is finished. Cale, no way.
Yeah.
Gerald, no way.
I think it's
So,
done.
so, I mean, could they then come back on this cigarette tax in a special session?
I think they could. There's several other taxes the House Democrats approved an increase in, but none of them were real major, and none of them were to the point where they would, I think, get a lawmaker defeated. There were various service-type taxes and different things that would help raise some additional revenue to balance the budget. But the cigarette tax, I think, was the leading revenue collector, and to me, I think it was a political thing from the Senate Republicans. I'm sure philosophically they're opposed to tax increases, but they just felt like, well, this is something we can use against the Democrats in the election. But the public's on the side of raising it, both for revenue enhancer and for health purposes. And so, if you look at a lot of bad choices, this is the least worse of those, and with as the governor said this morning, a 6% decrease in revenue already, they've got to do something. And we're all taking now with an additional 6%. Does that make us a 9% cut for higher education in this fiscal year? We can't take any more than that. And so, as Cal said, cleaning out the prisons, as some states are starting to do, is not going to be a popular move. Any lawmaker who votes for that, or if the governor does that, then I just think, boy, that's going to come back and bite them.
Republicans would have a very tough time trying to take us back to their districts, with the Democrats pointing out that the position that the Senate Republicans are taking is very soft on crime.
And nobody wants to be soft on crime. Right. Yeah. Another thing we talked about before the program was Jody Richards has been House Speaker for at least a millennia or two.
Since '96.
He's the longest serving House Speaker in Kentucky history. There are rumblings, perhaps, that maybe somebody might be after his job. What's the story about that?
Well, on February 5th, Greg Stumbo, who was he was Attorney General, got elected in 2003, ran for Lieutenant Governor with businessman Bruce Lunsford in the Democratic primary in 2007. They got second place, but second is not first. So as the outgoing Attorney General, he started taking a look at several races, including United States Senate. He is interested in becoming the Democratic nominee against United States Senator Mitch McConnell. But took a look at that race, decided it wasn't the right time, and decided instead to run for election again to the 95th House District, which is Floyd County, Prestonsburg.
And that's his home country.
Right. Stumbo country there. Grady Stumbo was from Prestonsburg. I believe he's a distant cousin of Greg.
He had that House seat for 20 years, too.
Yeah,
Greg Stumbo
and held it for
did,
30 years.
Yeah.
This guy served 19 years as majority floor leader before he became Attorney General, and now he's back in the House as a non-freshman freshman. There is rumblings that he may decide to take a look at either getting his job as majority floor leader back. There's rumors that Rocky Adkins might take an appointment by the governor to the Energy Cabinet, or he may decide to challenge the Speaker of the House, Jody Richards, head-on after the 2008 elections, when the organizing session is held in 2009. Jody Richards has gotten himself into quite a bit of crossfire because of in a lot of hot water because of involving the governor's gambling bill. The Committee on Elections and Constitutional Amendments voted against a version supported by a Speaker of the House. 6-5 was a vote against it. So the Speaker Richards removed Representative Dottie Sims, who was one of the 6 voting against it, removed her from the committee and instead put John Will Stacy and Tim Firkins, 2 Richards loyalists, on the committee, and then they voted I believe 7-5 or 8-4, something like that, the next day to get his bill out of committee. That one got him into a lot of criticism. Speaker Pro Tem Larry Clark, who was opposing Speaker Richards on this, sent some baby's breath flowers to and had them placed on Dottie Sims' desk when she came back into the House chamber the next day.
Wow. That's also interesting, the fact that a speaker's bill would be defeated in his own chamber. That speaks volumes about something.
Well, I remember when Julian Carroll was speaker, there were just 2 committees, the Pass Committee and the Fail Committee.
That's a different time, though, but you're right.
Yeah.
You're
If
right.
Rocky Adkins or Greg Stumbo were to challenge Jody Richards for the speakership, I think they'd they'd give him a heck of a run. They might be able to take it away from him.
And of course, in any type of legislative race for a position such as in a legislative leadership race to become speaker or anything like that, usually there's going to be 20 people who will publicly take sides with you. There's going to be 20 people who will publicly take sides against you, and there's going to be 20 who just want to see who's going to win so they can be on the winning side. And Richards has already survived tough challenges. In 2005, State Representative Rob Wilkie of either way, I was trying to remember where he's from.
I can't remember either.
Scottsville, perhaps.
Allen County.
Right. Rob Wilkie challenged Jody Richards for the speakership, and Jody Richards won only by one vote, and he won that based on a pledge that he made that the only thing he had run for in 2007 to be re-election as Speaker of the House. As we saw, he ran for governor, and a lot of state reps felt betrayed by his breach of promise.
I've also heard going way back that more than a few Democrats in the state Senate have been vexed with him because you go back to the redistricting and they accused him of taking care of his House members and not taking care of them. As a result of this redistricting, it put some Democrats in some pretty tight spots. And that's kind of a residual, I wonder.
He may find himself without a job, out the speakership next year. I wouldn't be a bit surprised. He's been there 12 years, and when you add up all these enemies that you've been making over the years, at some point.
And you're bound to make enemies. If you're a leader of anything, you're going to make enemies. And the fact that he's held on that long. And again, I wouldn't count him out.
He's tough. He's tough, and he's been around since '76. He's had that House seat, and he's a skilled politician and a likable person. But there are a lot of young, ambitious lawmakers that would like to get into leadership, so he may hold on. But
and you got to figure that Greg Stumbo is very ambitious, and I just can't imagine him, as you put it so well, a non-freshman freshman. He's not going to be content with that.
Several people said that he was the one who engineered Jody Richards' election as Speaker to start with, and he was always considered by some the most powerful member of the House, even though he was the majority leader under the Speaker.
I'd say much in the way of Tom DeLay, in this case, would be playing Greg Stumbo, and Dennis Hastert playing Jody Richards with the Republican leadership in the U.S. House. There was always the notion that Danny Hastert was Tom DeLay's boy in the speakership. You know, he was up there as a lightning rod to take any hits against Tom DeLay.
That's interesting. In the time we have left, let's take a look at some local races. We have a Democratic primary for the state Senate over in my district, the 1st District. Two Mayfieldians, former Congressman Carol Hubbard and former appeals judge Rick Johnson. What are you hearing out of that race?
I think that's going to be a very close election. On the one hand, Carol Hubbard's strong in that he has excellent name recognition. He'll raise a lot of money. He raised approximately $100,000 in his race in '06. And that was his old Senate district he got elected to in '68 before he was elected to the U.S. House, and he was there 18 years, and he did a lot of favors for a lot of people. And his strongest constituency group to me is older, particularly females, but people of a little bit of age. He did favors for. He did things for him. A lot of people feel like they owe him, and they're going to vote for him no matter what. And so that's going to make him tough to beat. On the other hand, he did have his legal problems, and he did serve some time in a federal prison, and there are a lot of younger, particularly younger males, who just simply can't vote for someone who's been a convicted felon. Rick Johnson, highly respected, Kentucky appellate court judge for 16 years, and well known in the district. Mayfield's his hometown.
Actually, Simpsonia.
Simpsonia, that's right.
We want to correct that. I mean, we don't want to get the Rough Riders upset here.
Simpsonia is a suburb of Mayfield, right?
I think it's Mayfield's a suburb of Simpsonia. Is how that works.
I should point out that he doesn't live in that Senate district. So
Right. We'll excuse him for being.
Yeah, I misspoke.
Right, you did.
Susan
he
Sohn,
hasn't
you know,
endangered his political career.
Yeah.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not. With that gaffe. Yeah.
But Rick is he'll be strong among labor, and he always ran strong, at least in his efforts for the Kentucky Appellate Court, and he'll raise a substantial sum of money too. And he's an aggressive campaigner. He proved that in his race for the Kentucky Supreme Court. So I wouldn't want to pick a winner in that one. I just think that's going to be extremely close a race, but it's going to be a fun and interesting, and I think aggressive and somewhat negative, attack-oriented campaign.
Cale?
You know, it's really too hard to say. Like he was talking about Rick Johnson and Carol Hubbard, you know, he gave you the biographical information. Rick, I'd say if Rick has a negative point, it'd be the 2006 Supreme Court race against Bill Cunningham. He gathered a lot of criticism for during the course of that campaign. There may be some residual bad will. Carol Hubbard, his strong point as a congressman and as a state senator, which he was from 68 to 75, was his strong emphasis on constituent services. People are going to remember that. But then again, people are also going to remember his legal troubles and, you know, the time he spent in a federal prison. And it's really, it's going to be tough, but it's going to be a very exciting race. And not to mention, whoever comes out of this primary is going to have to run against Republican Senator Ken Winters of Murray. I think this will easily be $1 million race for the first Senate district.
Do you want to commit on a winner in May?
No.
Well, of course, living in Mayfield, I really can't get a feel for this. I really just don't know.
I think whichever one wins should be, even though Ken Winters is the incumbent Republican state senator, he's a nice guy and he's a hard worker. But I do think that letter he wrote in support of Harrison Yachts is going to come back and haunt him extremely.
In the 1 minute we have, let's explain that to our viewers.
Well, State Representative Greg Yachts, what's this? Brent Yachts.
Brent
Yachts
from
is,
Greenville, Muhlenberg County.
15.
His son, Harrison Yachts, was intoxicated, 20-year-old student at Murray State University, 2 o'clock in the morning. 63-year-old Egyptian students walking home after spending time in the computer lab, and he runs her down and leaves her to die, kills her, and then tries to clean up the car and denies it and lies about it. And he got 20 years in prison, and several prominent people, including Ken Winters, wrote letters to the governor asking him to commute the sentence, and he reduced it down to from 20 years to 8 years, and he can be out of prison in just a few short years. And there are a lot of people in Western Kentucky who are extremely angry with this miscarriage of justice, and the fact that Ken Winters wrote a letter encouraging the governor to commute his sentence, I think is almost a killing move. I just really think he's going to have a hard time winning re-election because of that.
We're going to have to leave it with that. We're out of time. We'll come back again later on, talk about politics as it develops. My guest today was Gerald Watkins, political science professor at the college, and Cale Sullivan, student of politics here at the college.
So people wouldn't get us mixed up.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So
we look about the same age.
they do. They do. Barry Craig, we'll join you next time.